Marvel Comics has been around for a long time, and because of that, they have had to be quite creative with some of the villains they have had to come up with. And sometimes they really drop the ball. But we love it. I'm Adam Andrews, and this is the top 10 most useless Marvel villains. And at number 10 is I Scream. Now I need to get something off my chest. I Scream here is a mutant with the ability to transform himself into any flavor of ice cream. Literally any flavor, which gives me so many questions. But he has named himself I Scream, like I as in eyeball and scream. Why? Why not just go with straight up ice cream? Or like I, like the letter, scream. In the comments, give me your ideas for what would be a better ice cream related supervillain name other than eyeball scream. Please, like banana split you in half or something like that, just anything. Either way, I Scream was a villain of the X-Men who appeared one time, when he decided he needed to destroy the X-Men using their danger room. He actually got pretty far in that plan, sneaking into the mansion in his melted ice cream form, and was even able to overload Cerebro, taking down Professor X temporarily, before Xavier came back to and lowered the temperature in the room, freezing Ice Scream's ice cream form, which is when a clown turned him into a banana split and split from the scene. I'm not even joking. Just go read Obnoxio the Clown from 1983 and you'll see all you need to see. And at number 9 is Turner D. Century. Clifford F. Michaels was the son of a chauffeur of a millionaire named Morgan Riley. Now after his father passed on, Clifford was adopted by Riley, who was criminally obsessed with the values of the very early 20th century. And in order to instill those same values into Clifford, he closed off the boy's access to the outside world. Because of this, Clifford despised the social norms of the modern world when he was finally an adult and exposed to society. This is what made him become a villain, dubbing himself Turner D. Century. He donned a handlebar mustache, a straw boater hat, and a striped green jacket, and set himself to attacking any person or anything that represented modern society. So basically everything. After being defeated by Spider-Woman, he escaped prison somehow and developed the Horn of Time, which would allow this unremarkable hero to end the lives of anyone under the age of 65. Absolutely diabolical. But don't worry, the horn didn't even work and just knocked down anyone under 65 in a very limited range, who, as you can imagine, did have the bodily strength to get themselves back up again, and he was quickly taken down by Spider-Man. And at number 8 is the Slug. The Slug is just super fat. I wish I was joking, but like, this dude is obese to the point of immobility. He simply cannot stand up under his own power and needs a high-tech personal hovercraft to just get around. Luckily, he is a Miami-based crime lord, which means he can afford both his little hovercraft and the ungodly amounts of food that he needs to constantly be eating. On the plus side for Ulysses Lugman, his large amounts of fat let him float in water. It makes his vital organs basically impervious to attack and gives him a limited immunity to poison. He is essentially completely useless though against any opponent, which means he relies heavily on his goons, although he does have enough fat that he is infamous for completely suffocating victims between his rolls. Unlike a lot of large characters like this, the Slug isn't actually a mutant, and doesn't technically have any actual superpowers, although it is worth noting that the official handbook of the Marvel Universe claims that Slug technically is a mutant because, and I quote, "It is difficult to imagine how a normal person could achieve such tremendous mass and still remain alive." I actually had a blast making this list, and if you guys love fun topics like this, make sure you like this video and subscribe here at Top 10 Nerds so I can make more. Thank you. But in at number 7 is White Rabbit. For someone so incredibly inept at committing crimes, White Rabbit sure does have a relatively long history in Marvel Comics. In the beginning, sheltered rich girl Lorena Dodson committed her first crime by ending the life of her 87-year-old arranged husband, as she found the trophy wife life boring. She then used her inheritance to buy a bunch of high-tech equipment and, being inspired by Alice in Wonderland, she went off as the villainous White Rabbit. For her first crime, she shall rob a fast food joint. This dastardly crime brought her into confrontation with the most fearsome of heroes, Frogman. And she almost brought him down too if it wasn't for the intervention of Spider-Man, who finished her off with an astounding amount of ease. Spider-Man has actually defeated her on multiple occasions with the same amount of ease, and she's even been defeated by Mary Jane Watson. Now don't even get me started on the amount of animal-themed villains she has allied with. In fact, she's allied with a lot of other low-level villains, but never to any amount of great success. She does have a giant, heavily armed robotic rabbit though, and that part is kinda cool. Number 6, critical mass. Okay, so look, we already talked about the Slug, and I just want to say, I think Marvel has something against severely overweight people. The amount of supervillains who are just massive is actually ridiculous. The Slug, obviously, but like the Blob, the Shadow King, Pink Pearl, and the Kingpin, although that's actually all muscle. And then there's Critical Mass, aka Arnie Gunderson. Arnie was one of Peter Parker's classmates back in the 4th grade, but eventually he gained the mutant ability to project explosive forces from his fingertips, which is actually a really cool power. But that didn't save Arnie from being just a massive man for seemingly no reason. Together with some evil mutants, he formed the Band of Baddies, and with a name like that, you know we got some real winners here. The band abducted another explosive mutant named Mary Beck, which brought them into conflict with Wolverine and Spider-Man. Unfortunately for the baddies though, one of their number threatened Mary, who then accidentally unleashed her powers, taking out every single one of the villains. And we never saw Critical Mass ever again. The end. Lasted 3 issues of Marvel Comics Presents. That's it. Number 5, Asbestos Lady and Asbestos Man. Some villains are just a sign of the times, man. Asbestos is incredibly heat and fire resistant, and back in the day we really used to take advantage of the mineral. It was in thousands of products, and it even came into our comic books with the supervillain known as Asbestos Lady, who was fittingly a villain for the original Human Torch, the android Jim Hammond. Now Victoria Murdoch created herself a costume made entirely of asbestos, which basically made her immune to fire when she wore it. Since that is no longer back in the day, we now know that asbestos is actually incredibly carcinogenic. Not only does it cause mesothelioma, but it also causes a lung disease called asbestosis. Of course, neither the writers of the comics nor the villain herself actually knew this at the time though, but that didn't save Victoria, as she eventually did pass away at the age of 45 thanks to idiopathic mesothelioma. Kinda surprisingly, Marvel created Asbestos Man, Orson Karloff, as well, who had no connection to Asbestos Lady other than also wearing an armored suit of asbestos. And he actually survived his cancer, but continued wearing the armor, just this time he dragged around an air canister to keep him alive. He was unwilling to fight anyone, and everyone was afraid to go near him, which led to an hours-long standoff with the Great Lake Avengers before eventually just surrendering and then apparently dying at a later date off-panel, probably from the asbestos. Number 4, Lifeform. Now, look, Lifeform here is potentially very powerful, and after learning about this villain, I actually kind of hope they bring him back. But George Prefrock's time in comics came and went like a fart in the wind. The son of a fanatical right-wing libertarian saw George trained by his father to prepare him for the world. Although he wanted to be an actor, George was convinced by his dad to become a scientist. His dad actually also got George a job at Advanced Idea Mechanics, but I bet his father didn't know that this would inadvertently get George exposed to the pro-gamma virus. This virus mutated George into this grotesque monster, becoming known as the Lifeform. Now, George has superhuman strength, durability, a healing factor, and he can survive in water and the vacuum of space. But he's a monster. He even caused Frank Castle the Punisher to run away because his weapons had no effect on Lifeform. Now eventually Frank knocked him into a river with a rocket, but George came back, now with 2 personalities. One his normal peaceful self, and the other being the monster. George now came into conflict with Daredevil, but this time he was more of a confused monster, and eventually in an altercation with police, his heart began beating so fast that he collapsed and then dissolved into a puddle. But when he reformed, he was put into battle against the Hulk by the alien Mercy, who also turned him back into an actual man again. eventually. But this wouldn't last as he remutated and attacked an entire hospital. This led him into conflict with S.H.I.E.L.D., who contacted Mr. Fantastic, who was actually incapacitated, so the Silver Surfer took George to a dead planet destroyed by Galactus and then just left him there as he couldn't bring himself to put an end to this dual personality monstrosity. And that's the last we ever saw of Lifeform, just out on the remnants of a dead planet, one part of him wanting to end and the other half growing more and more hungry. Why is he useless? Because he is a massive wasted opportunity for a really cool character. And at number 3 is the Matador. There have been 2 people to assume the supervillain name of the Matador, and they were both arguably very useless. But the second Matador, whose real name is known only as Juan, is somehow much more violent and simultaneously much more useless. This Matador isn't even the main villain of the comic he appears in. When Daredevil Matt Murdock is in Monaco on the trail of a lawyer named Alton Lennox and his mob boss client, Tybalt Luca, going undercover to a party, Daredevil comes to the main attraction, which is a bullfighting ring. But oh my god, the Matador was actually in love with Tybalt's daughter Lily and was working with Tombstone. Whoa! He takes out Tybalt Luca with his sword, and then eventually Daredevil knocks out both him and Tombstone. But the original Matador, he used his cape to distract and blind people, which he tried to do to Daredevil, who's blind. Number 2, Stilt Man. As far as concepts for villains go, giant stilts is absolutely one of the worst ones. Have you ever tried to stand on stilts? If you were even successful in doing so, you probably realized just how difficult all other tasks became when you were on those stilts. Now, imagine those stilts were 290 feet high. What's interesting is that if you go to his Marvel wiki page, Stilt Man actually has quite a long history being involved in many different storylines, although I think it's fair to say that a lot of his appearances were just a little bit of a joke. But still, his stilts are actually pretty strong. At one point, the strength of them was able to plunge She-Hulk so far into the ground that she ended up in the subway. But on the other hand, she beat him by standing between his massive stilt legs and then just pushing them apart, causing Wilbur to fall all the way down into her arms, where she just promptly carried him like a baby to the authorities. Now don't even get me started on Lady Stilt Man. First of all, they couldn't even give her her own supervillain name. Lady Stilt Man? Just Stilt Lady. I don't know, man. But secondly, she was defeated by Deadpool when he opened up a manhole cover and one of her legs went straight down. Spider-Man even said that she was trying too hard and he webbed her up to a wall, which is just rude. And finally, in at number 1 is Paste Pot Pete. This guy rebranded himself and still couldn't save himself. Paste Pot Pete, or Peter Petruski, patented a multi-polymer adhesive that actually led him to become very wealthy. But being a complete doofus, instead of actually following that success, Peter decided to instead try and be a supervillain, creating a paste gun and successfully robbing a bank. Now following that, he decided he would next go after stealing a Delta cosmic missile from the military, and thanks to the Human Torch, this was a humiliating failure. Surprisingly, having your only weapon and tool as a villain, being a super glue gun, is not the key to success, and he quickly became a joke to the superhero community. He even rebranded himself to the Trapster, like I said, which is a much better name, but a little overshadowed by his time as Paste Pot Pete. Actually, that name causes him to go into a rage and is actually listed as one of his weaknesses on his wiki page. Despite his hilarious past, Trapster has been a recurring villain for years, although he's almost never taken seriously. But that's all the time I have got left for you guys today. This list was so fun, so show me your support down below so I can make a part 2. I'm Adam Andrews, this is Top 10 Nerd, and I'll catch y'all on the flippy flop. Peace out, nerds!